We've been to the moon, but we haven't set foot in our own backyard. There are massive gaps on our global map, hidden valleys where nature rules with an iron fist and humans are strictly outsiders. Today, we're revealing the most remote places left on Earth. You won't believe what's hiding in plain sight. Smash that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment. Which city are you watching from? Let's dive in. The Sangpo Gorge in Tibet. Imagine a place so deep it makes the famous Grand Canyon look like a small step. Located in the eastern Himalayas of Tibet, the Yarlung Sangpo Gorge is often called the deepest canyon in the entire world. Nature is truly whimsical in its creations. It was carved by the Yarlung Sangpo River, which later transforms into the Brahmaputra when it reaches India. To give you an idea of its scale, this gorge plunges more than 5,000 meters down the slope. For nearly all of the 20th century, even basic mapping of this region was extremely limited and difficult to achieve. Until the late 90s, very few foreigners had managed to complete an entire journey through this gorge. The weather there is complete madness, mixing high-altitude cold with a subtropical heat that generates sudden storms and thick fog out of nowhere. It is the kind of place where nature dictates the rules at all times. Several expeditions tried to explore the site, including a National Geographic team in 2002 that documented and confirmed this absurd depth. Despite all these efforts, the lowest parts of the gorge have still not been mapped in detail by anyone. There is no permanent human settlement in the central section, and large parts can only be accessed through a hike lasting several consecutive weeks. You would need incredible stamina and grit to face a trail like that. Satellite images show steep ravines branching off the main canyon that, in all likelihood, have never seen a human visitor. Even today, the Chinese government restricts access to much of the surrounding region, citing concerns for adventurer safety and site preservation. But what exists within the deepest tributaries, whether unknown animal species or hidden waterfalls, remains a great uncertainty. What we know clearly is that this valley is one of the last great unexplored natural corridors on the face of the Earth. It is fascinating to think that, in the middle of the year 2026, there are 5,000-meter chasms holding secrets that even satellites cannot fully decipher down below. 9. The Kayende Highlands. Located in the Enga province of Papua New Guinea, the Kayende Highlands are home to some of the most isolated valleys in the entire Pacific Ocean. Imagine a place sitting between 2,000 and 3,000 meters above sea level, forming a literal labyrinth of valleys carved by rivers that feed the sea pick and fly systems. Nature here is raw and imposing. Since there are no main roads and very few villages beyond the outer slopes, many of the inner valleys remain without a single human visit. It is a level of isolation that is almost impossible to conceive in this day and age. Fieldwork conducted in the early 2000s led researchers to record hundreds of species of plants and animals, including dozens that were entirely new to science. It is a dream come true for anyone into biology. However, the valleys lying beyond the primary study zones are dreadfully difficult to reach. Dense forest, marshy ground, and constant cloud cover make navigation a challenge worthy of an adventure movie. Getting lost there seems like the easiest thing in the world. Helicopter surveys have shown that large portions of the mountain range consist of limestone escarpments that surround and hide these basins. Many of them show no visible trails or any sign of human habitation. Even the local tribes prefer to live along the outer slopes and rarely venture into the deep valleys, except for occasional hunts. Their respect for the untouched wilderness is remarkable. As a result, researchers believe that entire networks of streams and glacial lakes remain unexplored. Satellite imagery confirms the existence of massive green basins surrounded by ridges shrouded in permanent clouds. It is a sight that is both cinematic and mysterious. But until proper ground surveys can be conducted, the deepest valleys of Kayende will continue to rank among the least studied places on our entire planet. It is surreal to think there are forests so dense and protected by stone walls that even the locals do not dare to enter them routinely. 8. The Peru River Valley in Western Australia. In the outback of Western Australia, the Paroo River Valley is one of the least visited drainage basins on the continent. It is the last completely free and unregulated river in the entire Murray-Darling Basin, running wild through an environment filled with salt lakes, clay pans, and low rocky ridges. It is nature in its purest and wildest state. Since water only appears there from time to time, the valley supports a very curious mix of ecosystems that depend entirely on the timing and strength of the floods. It is a fascinating life cycle to follow. After heavy rains, the channel fills up, and the wetlands explode with life as birds arrive, including pelicans, herons, and several rare species. Yet when the weather dries up, that same landscape turns into an almost impassable expanse of cracked clay and plains covered in salt crusts. Because of this extreme shift, very few scientific teams have risked venturing into the lower Paroo during active flood phases, and the logistics for a long-term study are a total nightmare. Imagine hauling all that equipment through that muck or the scorching heat. There are signs of ancient creek beds and dune systems buried under layers of silt, suggesting a long history of climate change in the region. However, because this erosion area is so far from any major highway or population center, almost no research has been done beyond an occasional survey here and there. The local peoples have known the rhythms of the Paroo for generations, following its cycles for food and ceremonies. They truly understand the soul of that land. But even they do not usually travel the entire length of the valley, because much of it remains physically inaccessible. In an era where most of Australia's waterways have been studied from top to bottom, the Paroo River Valley stands out as an intact and unexplored natural system. It is enormous, inhospitable, and still keeps many secrets hidden beneath those salt crusts. It is incredible how a place can be a paradise full of life one month and an impassable salt desert the next. 7. The Nyangani Highlands Valleys in eastern Zimbabwe. Mount Nyangani is the highest point in all of Zimbabwe, reaching 2,592 meters in height, and it rises imposingly above the national park right near the border with Mozambique. Deep within the eastern escarpment, there are valleys covered in dense forests and slopes so steep they take your breath away just by looking at them. The place lives under a near-constant mist, giving it the air of a mystery movie for those watching from afar. Some areas have never been properly explored due to the thick vegetation, the totally unpredictable weather, and the lack of roads. This region is part of the Eastern Highlands, which hold rare mountain forests and grasslands that form a sort of green island very different from the drier lands to the west. Small streams plunge down narrow ravines, feeding rivers that flow toward the Indian Ocean. It is a spectacle of nature that few humans have seen up close. However, many of these habitats are very poorly studied. Field researchers from Zimbabwe's wildlife authorities have noted that some valleys below Mount Nyangani have never been visited for systematic sample collection. The local Shona communities consider parts of the mountain and its valleys to be sacred lands and avoid entering them without extreme necessity. This cultural respect, added to the natural challenges of the terrain, has kept much of the area in a totally pure and untouched state. Even satellite images struggle to pierce the cloud cover that stays parked over the range most days of the year. It is as if nature itself wants to hide from our eyes. Researchers believe that several small valleys within the national park still have no detailed topographical data. To make matters worse for anyone trying to go in, the terrain is very prone to landslides, and the trails become completely impassable during the rainy season. The lack of roads and conservation policies that limit human interference ensure that these inner valleys are among the least explored areas in all of southern Africa. It is an environment where life continues to thrive exactly as it has for millennia. It is chilling to think that a people's respect for a sacred mountain has managed to protect an entire ecosystem from human curiosity for so long. 6. The Dibang Valley in India. In the far northeast of India, very close to the border with Tibet, the Dibang Valley appears as one of the most isolated and least disturbed regions in the entire eastern Himalayas. We are talking about an area covering more than 9,000 square kilometers of mountains, rivers, and thick forests. And get this, although there are small villages inhabited by the Idu Mishmi people, giant slices of the upper and inner valleys remain totally inaccessible and, in practice, have never been explored. The terrain there changes altitude so drastically that it creates an incredible variety of ecosystems, ranging from super high alpine meadows to dense tropical jungles in the lower parts. It is a true hidden paradise. All this diversity supports very rare species, such as the red panda, the mishmitakin, the clouded leopard, and various orchids and rhododendrons that are found nowhere else in India. Expeditions there have always been very limited by the lack of infrastructure and constant landslides that block any attempt to pass. To top off the challenge, the region has one of the highest rainfall rates in all of India, making any serious exploration plans difficult. Satellite data shows entire tributary valleys above the main settlements that have no record of human trails or any type of habitation. In recent years, conservation scientists and the Zoological Survey of India have made a few short incursions into the easier-to-reach areas of the lower valley. And in just those fringes, they have already identified new species of amphibians and insects. Imagine what is in the middle. Even mapping efforts suffer, as cloud cover often hides the view from satellites for weeks on end. The Indian government even proposed a hydroelectric project in parts of the valley, but resistance from local communities and environmental groups ended up delaying any work. For now, the upper Dibang remains a wild land, shaped by monsoons, rocks, and snow. It is a place where nature rules everything, and many smaller valleys still wait for the visit of the first scientist in history. Can you imagine the thrill of being the first human being to discover an animal species that no one has ever seen before? 5. The Putarana Plateau Valleys in Siberia. In the far north of central Siberia, the Putarana Plateau is a colossal volcanic formation covering more than 250,000 square kilometers. To give you an idea of the scale, the valleys, canyons, and fjord-like lakes are all within the Arctic Circle. It is a place so difficult to reach that most of it has never felt the weight of a human footstep. Located in the Russian region of Krasnoyarsk, access only happens by helicopter or by facing a river journey that seems to have no end. Over millions of years, erosion from glaciers and rivers has carved these cliffs into monumental valleys and gorges. Some of these chasms drop more than 1,000 meters, and many remain without detailed mapping because the landscape is simply too vast. The scenery is rugged to the extreme and is usually hidden under clouds or snow for most of the year. In 2010, the area was declared a United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization World Heritage Site because of its untouched ecosystems and rare wildlife, which includes reindeer, wolverines, and snowy owls. Yet even the reports from the United Nations admit that significant parts of the valleys in the plateau's interior have never been visited by scientists. The mix of a hostile climate, total lack of infrastructure, and seasonal flooding makes any continuous exploration nearly impossible. Even aerial mapping missions suffer there, magnetic interference near the pole and the totally unpredictable weather glitch the equipment. Because of this extreme isolation, the valleys of the Putarana Plateau are some of the least disturbed on Earth. To this day, many of its inner canyons have never been seen in person by anyone. What we have are just glimpses from satellite images showing an infinite network of dark valleys hidden under the thick Arctic clouds. It is bizarre to think there is an area larger than many countries where man has never set foot, and where compasses simply stop working right. 4. The side canyons of the Zanskar Valley in India. Within the Indian Himalayas in Ladakh, the Zanskar Valley is famous for its absurd beauty and breathtaking isolation. While the main valley and its small villages receive hikers and pilgrims, many of the countless side canyons branching off the Zanskar River are still largely unexplored. It is a labyrinth of stone that seems to have no end. Many of these gorges were carved by glaciers over thousands of years and are so narrow and steep that you can only enter them during the short summer months or in winter when the river freezes completely. Satellite images show dozens of tributary ravines snaking through uninhabited mountains, but very few have been mapped or even visited. Some expeditions have tried to reach these tributaries, but frequent rockfalls, treacherous ice, and flash floods make it all very dangerous. Nature there is not playing around. The region's isolation is reinforced by the extreme climate. In winter, temperatures can drop to -30 degrees Celsius, cutting off any travel route. In summer, melting snow creates torrents that erase trails and reshape canyon walls in the blink of an eye. Even the main Zanskar River Road, built in recent years, cannot penetrate most of these side valleys. Because of these geological barriers, scientific exploration there has been minimal. Maps from the Geological Survey of India identify some of these tributaries only as unmapped drainage, showing that even basic measurements are missing. Despite the beautiful appearance seen from above by satellites, the inner network of Zanskar's side valleys is one of the least understood environments in the entire Himalayas. They are physically real, they are there, but they are rarely accessed and remain almost completely undocumented at ground level. It is impressive how a temperature variation of -30 degrees can create an invisible wall that keeps humans far away from these secrets. 3. The Sayan Mountains valleys in Russia. Stretching across the border between southern Siberia and northern Mongolia, the Sayan Mountains form one of the most remote systems in all of Asia. Their inner valleys, especially those in the eastern and western ranges, are a mystery even to Russian scientists. It is a vastness of giant forests, deep glaciers, and complex drainage networks that feed the great rivers of Siberia, like the Yenisei. The human presence in these valleys is almost zero. What you find there are just a few reindeer herders and hunters from small indigenous groups, like the Tofalar, who live on the outer edges. Beyond these settlements, the terrain becomes a literal labyrinth that is impossible to cross. Access roads simply disappear and give way to cliffs, a dense taiga and rivers that rise with meltwater from glaciers. Satellite images show long linear valleys cutting deep into the range, many with no sign of trails, bridges, or any ancient habitation. The Russian Academy of Sciences has done some sporadic research on the local geology, but the focus has always been on the peripheral areas. The inner valleys, especially near the OK Plateau, are practically blank zones on detailed topographical maps. It is as if that part of the world hasn't been discovered officially yet. Constant snow, poor visibility, and a lack of infrastructure mean that even aerial surveys are inconsistent. Scientists believe that many of these valleys may harbor unique plants and small mammals adapted to microclimates trapped between these high ridges. But confirming this is difficult without long-term fieldwork. The harsh winter, with temperatures plunging to -40 degrees Celsius, and seasonal floods keep any explorer away. Expeditions require total self-sufficiency and depend on rivers for access. The result is that huge areas of the Sayan valleys have never been visited in person, being one of the largest unexplored wildernesses in Eurasia. It must be a feeling of total isolation to be in a place where the thermometer reads -40 degrees and there isn't a single reliable map. 2. The Kakar Valleys in China. In the far west of the Xinjiang Autonomous Region in China, where the Pamir Mountains meet the western edges of the Kunlun Range, lie the Kakar Valleys. It is a desolate series of gorges and basins that remain almost entirely unexplored. This region is part of what we call the roof of the world, a tangle of glacial peaks bordering Tajikistan and Afghanistan. Even by Central Asian standards, the Kakar area stands out for its total isolation. With elevations reaching 6,000 meters, the valley walls are sharp and unstable, shaped by continuous freeze-thaw cycles, and many are filled with debris from constant landslides. These severe conditions, the thin air, the year-round cold, and the complete absence of infrastructure ensured that very few foreigners, if any, had ever descended into their depths. Historically, this area was a blank spot, even on the most detailed military maps of the Soviet Union and China. In the mid-20th century, geologists from both nations made short helicopter reconnaissance flights over the main ridges, but strong winds and political restrictions prevented them from going deeper. It is a place where bureaucracy and the weather play on the same team against explorers. Limited images show massive ice-filled trenches but fail to reveal details like vegetation or water flow under seasonal snow. Since scientific missions need several layers of government approval, which are rarely granted, Almost everything we know comes from satellite sensors. These images show a mosaic of sharp ridges and U-shaped valleys that seem to connect a chain of hidden lakes. Some of these lakes have patches of vegetation around them, perhaps cold-resistant alpine grasses, but there is no sign of trails or animal tracks. The few local residents are semi-nomadic herders who move livestock around the periphery during the short summer. They themselves do not enter the deep Kakar valleys, both because of the danger and the fact that the terrain offers no grazing. Local oral histories describe the upper mountains as lands of ice and wind, where storms arise out of nowhere and last for days. The Kakar valleys are real places, visible from space but inaccessible to us. The isolation here is both natural and political, shaped by ice and rigid borders. It is one of the last corners of the Earth where the silence of stone and snow has lasted for millennia without a single recorded human footprint. It is impressive how 6,000 meters of altitude and a dash of bureaucracy can keep a place totally invisible to the rest of the world. 1. The Yangalo Valley System in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Hidden in the highlands of northeastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, very close to the border with South Sudan and Uganda, this valley system is one of the least known regions on the entire African continent. While much of Central Africa's tropical forests have already been mapped by satellites, this corridor is frighteningly underdocumented. Even though it is in one of the areas with the highest biodiversity on the planet, almost no direct scientific fieldwork has happened there. Nature is the one in charge. The Yangalo Valley is part of a larger drainage basin that feeds the Ua River, a tributary of the giant Congo. It descends from high ridges that rise to about 2,000 meters before turning into forest-covered floodplains. Seen from above, the valley looks like a labyrinth of winding channels and vegetation so dense it shows no sign of human settlement. To give you an idea of the isolation, the nearest trails end more than 100 kilometers away. Reaching the valley would require weeks of hiking through what is considered some of the most difficult tropical forest terrain on Earth. You would need serious boots and repellent to face a challenge like that. The people living a few days away are agricultural and pastoral communities from the Lundu and Hema peoples, but they prefer the edges of the plateau instead of venturing into the inner valleys. Oral reports from local guides describe these lands as impassable swampy forests, full of dangerous wildlife and deep mud. There is no reliable data on the plants or animals there, and no formal mapping expedition has been recorded in academic literature to date. Even aerial reconnaissance has been minimal. Persistent clouds and conflicts in the eastern Congo region since the 90s have left the area poorly photographed and rarely flown over. But science doesn't take its eyes off it, at least from a distance. Scientists have long suspected that valleys like Yangalo may harbor undiscovered species. Due to the isolated geography and microclimates, biologists believe the place could hide beings that diverged from their relatives thousands of years ago, surviving in forest pockets isolated by altitude and rivers. Satellite data from the European Space Agency's Sentinel-2 program revealed patches of lighter vegetation that could be swampy clearings or small inland lakes, but nothing has been confirmed on the ground. The Yangalo Valley remains a void in modern geography, a massive and real setting that exists without human footprints or first-hand descriptions. It is fascinating and at the same time terrifying to think that an entire forest could have evolved in isolation for thousands of years without us knowing anything about it. What do you think about these places forgotten by time? Comment your city's name below, leave a like, and subscribe with notifications on for more mysteries. There are more amazing videos popping up on your screen right now. Keep watching and see you next time.